Standing up in McKinney, this is According to Callus, episode 674. We're just going to go with the title, Next. Coming to you on the 29th of July, the year of our Lord 2024. And that's it. That's all I got for an intro there, folks. Well, let me just say, before we go any further, it is tough. It is tough. I mean, I think 90% of my downloads have disappeared. I don't know if it's real or imagined. The podcast world, I don't know how they track and do it legitimately. I really don't. I've been through this before. My inclination is to just keep on going and ignore it, but I got to tell you, it's frustrating. I mean, it was a highlight 2 years ago to get 50 downloads. And then when you get 800 reliably for a long period of time, and then the next thing you know, you're getting 20 again, something doesn't add up. Something's not right. It's almost enough to make you say, you know what, just it's not worth the time anymore. But I don't believe it's real. I think most of the digital world is not real. I think most of what we see online or watch on TV anymore is just simply not real. It's separate from reality. But what is real is what I'm doing right here, sitting here now, popping out an episode off the top of my head after a day's worth of work and a weekend that I was supposed to recover but really didn't. And here we are, another week is upon us, and I look around and I see what in the world is going on. The only response is, next. So the way we fix this, the way we overcome, the way we continue to step forward is to like, share, and subscribe to the program. You knew that's where I was going, right? Follow me on your social media of choice. Join me. I've got a page and a group over at Facebook. I'm a pro at Gab. I drop in at MeWe, and, for now, you can still find my show on YouTube. So here we go, on with the program. So when I say next, this can be construed a number of different ways, but the way I'll put it to you is, what else you got? I mean, you already hit me with all this stuff. What's next, right? So let's just roll out some likely things that we could expect in the next day, the next week, the next month, and the next year. Now, I want to be clear, and I'm going to add in the original proviso that I stand by. Everything about this show is my opinion and my thoughts. You should and you can do your own research. Double check. Investigate. Do your own critical thinking. Don't depend on what I'm telling you. What I am doing in this show is basically an opinion program based off of information that I have readily available, or that I have read in the past, or that I have heard. And guess what? Sometimes as a human being, you get it wrong. You forget it, or you misremember it, or you transverse some dates. It's okay. Pretty much everything that I work on saying or pointing you at should be what they call evergreen, right? There's a core principle, something that you can always go back to. The specifics or the latest version or the detail of the day are less important. But let's be honest, what's happening today informs what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day, right? What happened yesterday and the day before that informed what's going on today. So everything builds upon itself. Everything continues forward. So when I say tomorrow is the next day, right? The future, if you will. What's likely to be next? Well, we've had one of two presidents removed from the ballot. But for a flick of the finger of God, we would have had both. Well, maybe not. Maybe they would have still just removed one of the two presidents from the ballot. Now, I know there's some concern, right, about the current candidate that's going to be at the top of the ballot. So when we say what's next, this is going to be something that's not going to be in the next day. So we're going to put a pin in it right now. But for what it's worth, I don't really believe that Kamala is going to be at the top of the ticket. I just don't. Whatever negatives you're hearing about J.D. Vance, which is in fact probably the thing that I'm going to say for the next day, I expect J.D. Vance to be under closer scrutiny. I expect something is afoot. I don't know what. Can't put my finger on it. It's just something seems off. Maybe it was a feint. Maybe not. I mean, there's already probably millions of signs made that say Trump Vance. Just saying. Okay, so realistically, where are we going? All right, so what do I think is going to be next in the next couple of days? Well, let's take an easy one first. Sleepy Creepy Joe, he's going to go off into the sunset. I don't know if he's going to be able to get himself those sweet, sweet pardons that he can write for himself and his family. But I think he's going to go. I don't think he's going to make the end of his term. And honestly, I expect him to be gone before their convention. So when I say next day, I'm talking imminent, anytime now. And again, it's just a guess. It's pure speculation. The Democrats have already shown time and time again they don't really care about quote-unquote democracy or a representative republic. For them, it's all about power. And to be fair, the Republican Party isn't entirely different about that either. Because the human condition boils down to it's all about power. So that's why I say it could be any day. The next day, it could happen. The other thing that realistically could happen the next day, Ukraine could fall. I mean, at this point, when you watch the mess that's going on in Europe right now, I don't think there's enough men left in Europe that can, quote unquote, save Ukraine. In fact, I think inadvertently the Russians might be saving the Ukraine. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but as they say, what's next? All right, we're going to move on to the next week, only because I can't think of anything that's so pressing that I'd want to say could happen any day. But within the next week or so, I will double down on Joe going off of the White House roles there. I also will double down on Kamala being in question, whether or not they really... I just don't buy it. I can't believe the entire Democrat Party, which is clearly split and fractured, is just ready to roll over for Harris. I mean, at least 4 years ago, Biden was believable. Before that, you had, Hillary, which was at least believable. But Harris? Come on. I mean, look, I know you've got people that are blue no matter what. I get it. And I know there's women that will vote for a woman just because she's a woman. Okay, I get it. But let me ask you, are you really comfortable with this person? I mean, you can hate Trump all you want. And to a certain extent, okay, fine, I'll give it to you. But, I mean, J.D. Vance, not even on the same situational planet as the Donald, and 1,000 times better than Harris. I mean, I'm curious who they're going to throw on that ballot with Harris. I mean, who's going to be willing to go on that ballot? Because honestly, I don't believe she's going to win. And unless the Democrats are purposely trying to throw this election, I mean, it'll be close. I mean, they'll make a good horse race out of it. I mean, that's what it's all come down to now, right? They want you to pay attention. They want you to see what's going on so that we have our ratings next month. But the reality is, that's what we're dealing with. So what we're talking about the next week, in case you haven't heard, there's the every 4-year sports festival, aka the Olympics, going on right now. And while I'm not terribly surprised, I am mildly disappointed at their behavior. I don't know what it is with the European globalists, right? That they think they can just do whatever they do and nobody's paying attention and nobody's going to notice what's going on there. I mean, look, I know the rest of the world just probably rolls their eyes at this nonsense, and the Europeans think they're all high and mighty, but really and truly, if they don't watch out, they're going to be getting their heads lopped off by a bunch of guys screaming Allah Akbar. And that may not happen next week, but it could be next month at the rate they're going. I mean, I know there's 600 million Europeans, and if those 600 million Europeans actually found some manly men amongst them, they might be able to fight back and push back. But at the rate they're currently going, I can very easily visualize it being subjugated, much like Spain was for about 800 years, right? Or Far Eastern Europe that was subjugated for about 400 years. Now, for those of you that don't do your history class, right, and you've been now schooled on your Greek and Roman mythology, let me just tell you something. Those folks that are coming up from the Middle East, from North Africa, from Central Asia, South Central Asia, Indonesia, they're all unified over a theory or a religious bent that they must purify the world and everybody should submit. I mean, if you're more worried about Christians and their quote-unquote scary nationalism, you probably ought to pay much closer attention to our brethren on the mat facing Mecca. Just saying. But it's as soon as next week that could happen, right? I mean, Israel's doing their best they can to eradicate those in Gaza. Not that I necessarily approve of how that's playing out, but I can certainly understand it or understand what's going on there. They're certainly going to understand they're outnumbered at roughly 10-1. Why? But here we are. Oh, well, the United States will stick their nose in for us. The United States will protect us. It doesn't matter what our bad behavior is. We've got the biggest country in the planet, the most heavily armed nation in the planet. Sure you do. So let's move on to next, as in next month, right? Next month, I could very easily see China taking back Taiwan. And honestly, I think there's very little the United States can do about it at this point. I mean, I'm going to guess there's a percentage of the Taiwanese that want nothing to do with it. I'm going to also guess there's a larger group of them that will flee when they're taken over. And I got to wonder, do the Chi-Coms, are they going to just be okay with that? Let those people flee? I mean, why make them stay? They're going to be a thorn in your side. Just chase them away. I mean, they did try to, do this benign takeover in Hong Kong and Macau and such, but it hasn't really worked out so well for those folks. I'm guessing it's going to be a little more strict when they take back Taiwan. And I'm guessing that the militaristic nature and background of most of Taiwan is not going to be good for that. They're not going to go along with that. I mean, again, it's pure speculation. I don't know. I mean, and even the people that spend all this time and energy studying and telling us they know the Asian mind and they can predict the future and, trust them. I've lost all faith in those folks. I'm just looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, the Russians have seen that we fled Afghanistan. We left a ton of stuff behind. The Russians have seen that we've done nothing but throw money and bluster for Ukraine. The Russians have seen that the Israelis are doing their little ethnic cleansing over in Gaza there, and we just are okay with it. Now, the Chinese are seeing the very same things, and the Chinese and the Russians got to be thinking to themselves, now who's the paper tiger? I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not enthusiastic about the idea of getting involved in a two-front war. I'm not enthusiastic of trusting our military to do much of anything at this point. Now, I'll be honest, probably anybody that's been in more than about 6 or 8 years and hasn't been replaced by the current administration is probably really solid. Probably knows what they're doing. The ones that didn't get jabbed, that they chased out, those are the guys that we really would prefer to have there. but we're compromised. They've hollowed out the military just like they've hollowed out every other organization that was designed to prevent the takeover of these United States. So now that we've kind of covered the next month scenario here, right? Next month, what could happen? Let's think about next year. Now, keep in mind, I've just read a series of 5 books, the Blue Dawn series. By the way, Blaine Pardone wrote a great series of books there. Go to Amazon, look up Blue Dawn series. It's worth your time. Pick them up, buy them, read them, weep, weep. It plays out a scenario where the military essentially lets the government fall, lets the progressives take over. And honestly, that's entirely plausible within the next year. I mean, we've removed a sitting president. In other words, he's not running again, but I think he's not even going to make the end of his term. And quite frankly, I'm really surprised he's made it this far. The person that's replacing him is terrible. Terrible. Now, granted, there's a whole lot of women that don't care and they're just thinking with their ovaries. And I'm sorry, that was mean. That's not fair. There's a whole lot of women that are upset and feel that things have been mansplained to them for far too long and they need one of their own in charge. Is that a more politically correct way to put it? I mean, realistically, if the only reason you're voting for Harris, just like Hillary before her, is because she's a woman, yeah, I think you need to check yourself. I really do. Now, perhaps you're a leftist. Perhaps you're a Democrat D and you're going to always go blue. I get that. And while it's disappointing, I'm at least willing to accept that. I mean, it's a nominally better argument than she's a woman. Well, she's a Democrat. I mean, this is not a value add. In fact, I still don't believe that they got as many votes as they allegedly got with Biden-Harris. But, I mean, be that as it may, this is the world we live in. It's unreal. It's fake. Nothing we see, nothing we hear can be really, truly trusted in the digital world. Now, unfortunately, there are no longer analog transistors that I can pop on or transmitters, I should say, and do a radio show. So I am dependent on my little digital resource where I record myself and put it out on the internet for you folks to listen to. And I hope I'm mildly entertaining. I hope I'm informative. I hope I give you an opportunity to think about things just a slightly different way. Independent media is what we got. That's all we've got left, ladies and gentlemen. That's what's next, right? Okay, so I think I've kind of given you, just some wild guesses, if you will. I mean, I'm trying to have some fun. Look, the last couple of weeks have been rough. They've been tough on everybody. Even on vacation, it was, where I was 2 weeks ago, it was kind of tough. So many things coming at you, so many different changes and whatever else. I had to do 5 episodes just to kind of sort of get caught up. And then this weekend hit. All right, so that being said, that's part 1. We're going to move on to part 2. I'm going to give you about another 10, 15 minutes here of different subject matter, if you will. As you may be aware, I advertised the Texit Blueprint that was going to be happening in Greenville this last Saturday. It went down. It was an all-day event. They had a state senator-elect, or is it state representative-elect, Brent Mooney. Now, he signed the Texas First Pledge, and honestly, I'm thinking to myself, if you are a Texas representative that has an R after your name and you're even nominally conservative, why in the world would you not sign the Texas First Pledge? Well, I understand there are some people that are afraid because they're not comfortable with the idea of independence for the state of Texas, becoming an independent nation once again. I get it. But if you look at it from the standpoint of, as a state representative or a state senator, the first step is a vote, right? You're turning it over to your people, the people that elected you, to determine whether or not they're even interested in taking that step. Now, with the blueprint, which, again, look, full disclosure, I did not make it there. I had other responsibilities, but I've gotten to meet Mr. Miller. I've heard some of his presentations in the past. I believe I've met Mr. Brent Money at least on one occasion. From all I hear is that it was a great program and layout of how we can make this happen. Now, I being me, and sometimes not wanting to let certain things go, I ask myself, if you are a state representative and you represent the state of Texas in Austin, why would you not want to put Texas first? I mean, why would your first concern not be what the people of Texas want? Well, what would prevent you from wanting to do that? Now, look, I understand there's some Democrats that are hardcore progressive, and I'm not speaking to them. I also understand there's some hardcore Lincolnites, right? All-in unionists that have ours after their name. I'm not necessarily talking to them either. But I am talking to the handful of Democrats that actually have the ability to think for themselves and outside the box. And by that, I'm referring to elected officials, state senators or state representatives. There's got to be a handful left that have a D after their name. I'm wondering why you wouldn't want to be on board, conceptually at least, with putting Texas first. Oh, excuse me. Furthermore, I would really be surprised why, other than those couple hardcore Lincolnist, unionist people, as a Republican, why you wouldn't be on board conceptually with the idea of putting Texas first. Now, setting aside the ultimate goal of Texas first, or Texit, meaning that we want to be a newly recreated, self-governing Republic of Texas, setting that ultimate goal aside, there are a number of steps along the way which are very pro-Texas, which are important to Texas, which protect Texas's sovereignty, Texas's ability to act and take care of their own, and quite frankly, legitimately put Texas interests first. Protecting their people, their land, their resources, their water. Well, I guess land and water are technically resources, but you know what I'm saying here. They put the concerns of the people that are actually in Texas first. If you're an elected official, what is your excuse for not signing off on this? And the first check you can say is, look, I'm all for putting Texas first. All these other things are super important. And while maybe I'm not going to support full independence as an elected representative, maybe I just philosophically don't agree with the idea. Maybe I'm, not all in. Maybe I'm not fully convinced. Maybe I'm a coward. I don't know. Certainly, you must be okay with the notion of putting it to a vote, right? I mean, we've talked about this time and time again. I don't know how many episodes of Texit Tuesday I've done where I just said, put it to the vote. I mean, it seems like a win-win situation for everybody, right? So you've got your Texas nationalist people, right? The Texians, the Texicon people, however you want to phrase it. We want to vote. So if the vote turnout, and this is a Republican primary, mind you, because I don't think the Democrats are going to give us the time of day, but hypothetically speaking, in the Republican primary, and again, this is old hat. We've talked about this. If you get less than 30%, that's kind of a slap on the hand, right? Hey, yeah, that's all well and good, but we in the Republican Party, we're not willing to assert our independence right now. We're not really interested. Okay, all right. So the folks over at Texit, right, the Texas First people, kind of circle the wagons and think, well, what do we need to do to convince people that maybe this is the best outcome? Maybe this is what's best. We have to be able to sell the idea or the notion or the outcome. What do people need to hear or learn to get them from opposition to pro? Now it becomes, at least you have a starting point. We got our 30%, right? Now let's look at the next outcome. You get 5%. 5% of the Republican primary voters say they would support Texit. Well, the first question I'd have is, who's counting those votes? but let's just say hypothetically, it's real, right? That's the 5%. That's our threshold. That's the only people in the Republican Party is 5% that are interested in this. Well, then you would have people that can legitimately say, hey, yeah, we told you all that this is some kind of fringe thing that just some crazies want, because people are really good with giving up their individual liberties to be protected by government. People are really good with this whole union thing where the federal government tells us how to live our lives. People aren't really concerned about putting Texas concerns first and foremost. Now, I don't believe that's going to be the outcome, but I can certainly hear that argument, and I would expect it full on if we got that 5%, right? Now, here's where it gets interesting. Let's say it's anywhere from 45% to 55%. And we're going to call that within a margin of error, right? What do I mean by that? Well, at any given election, 50% plus 2 or 3 is a 5-point swing. Well, let's be generous. Let's say 48 to 52%, right? Now you got your 2-point swing either way, right? So you're approximately evenly split. So now you've got a really interesting situation here. We need to figure out what that looks like. Because now you're looking at an even split. What does that mean? I mean, one of the biggest problems with a quote-unquote democracy is 51% dictate terms to the other 49%. They don't take into account the liberties or the protections that exist for that group of people. Some people would feel threatened by this, and you should. When 51% is enough to push and bully the other 49%, that's a huge problem. That's a recipe for disaster. That's an opportunity to slow down, retool your conversations and your talk. I think it would be fair to say this is where you get into that concurrent majority thing, right? Yeah, you need to go look that up. That goes back to the generation after the Founding Fathers. Yeah, a guy named John Calhoun. Ooh. Yeah, but in any case, the idea is you can't force anything with a very small majority and expect it to stick and expect it to be meaningful. You have to be cautious, careful, and implement things where you've got buy-in. That means you're going to have to make some compromise. Now, let me be honest. The left has been doing an awesome job at this as they march us into a progressive hellhole. For decades, for a century plus, the progressives have been pushing us further and further into their black hole. They'll suck you down into nothingness. Yes, well, that's understood when you can take the time out to look at it and acknowledge what's going on, but it is not an outcome that we want. It's not something that we desire, but that's where we're at. So again, now it gets really interesting because you can argue maybe it's not a full majority, but it is a significant amount of the population. Because keep in mind, we're going to just say generously that 58% of the people of the state of Texas identify as Republicans. And for those that want to quibble, let's just make it 55%. 55% of the state of Texas self-identifies as a Republican. And we're going to say 15% bother to show up and vote. I'm making up these numbers here. Right? So 15% of 55%, and then you just got between 48 and 52% of those people in support of becoming an independent nation. That's significant. That's huge. I mean, at this point, if you got the Republican Party still, basically doing everything they can to stymie this, you may wander over to the Democrat people and say, hey, look, we're going to form an independence party. We'd like your 20 or 30% of you folks that agree with us to come on over here and join with us. At that world, everything just got a whole lot more interesting. Now, I know that most of the folks over in Texas nationalist movement, they'd prefer to work within the system that exists. They're not looking to start another battle. And I don't blame them. I think they're going about it the right way. But if you're constantly fighting the party that the majority of your members belong to just to get a vote, at a certain point you're going to realize that not only do you have a problem in D.C., you got a problem in Austin. And then you throw in the fact that you've got a whole number of people down there that don't want you to be able to make Texas better. They don't want to improve Texas. They like it just the way it is. Now, I got to be honest, of all the states in the union, Texas is top tier. Now, we can maybe argue some semantics of we're number one, number two, number three, but I don't think anybody doubts that in many ways Texas is the best state to go to. And overall, pretty sure we're the best state to go to. Depending on what you're looking for. Okay, we'll put that little proviso in there. So we're going to be really careful how we do things. Okay? At a 50-50 split, now things get very, very interesting. And that's why I say 50-50 is if you get 48 or better, you get 52 or maybe a little less. That's essentially a 50-50 split. I mean, that's margin of error stuff, folks. But things got extremely interesting at that point. Now here comes the next one. Say you get north of 60%. North of 60% of the Republican primary voters say they want to look at independence. Now keep in mind, there's anywhere from 25 to 30% of the Democrat voters that want the same thing. And probably, let's just say generously, 40 to 45% of independent voters want the same thing. That gives us essentially a functional majority of Texans that want to put Texas first. Now, it's important here. I didn't say they want Texas independence, but they want to put Texas first. Because I think once we start figuring out the challenges or some of the things that we're going to need to do in order to get and facilitate independence from these United States, there's going to be some roadblocks. We're going to lose some support. There's going to be some questions. That's all normal. That's okay. Some of this can be dealt with in conventions. Some of this can be dealt with in just meet and greet, sit downs, that kind of thing. But honestly, everything up until that point should be about putting Texas's needs first. What do I mean? Every bit of our energy policy in Texas ought to be about how does it benefit Texas and we Texians. Every bit about our natural resources ought to be about putting Texas concerns first and Texians concerns first. No, we don't want to waste our resources. We don't want to abuse our resources, but we also don't want to we don't want to pretend that they're not there to be used and improved. I'm less concerned about what happens in New Mexico or California than I am about what's going on in Texas. Now, that doesn't mean we start a fight with our neighbor in New Mexico, but what it does mean is when we sit down and negotiate with them, we're always looking at what's best for Texas. Certainly, we have enough oil, enough natural gas, and at this point, certainly enough wind power and sun power that we ought to be able to provide more than enough energy for the entire state of Texas. Now, granted, it has to be done well. We have to improve our network, right? The grid. Who's been talking about that? Oh, that's right. Bob Hall for only like a decade plus. We have to fix those things. Those should be high priority items if you're working with a Texas first mindset. Never mind whether or not you're actually going to see independence. If you're thinking about Texas first, you're fixing that grid. You're fixing our energy production. You're going to be far less concerned about the EPA, the FEC, and all the other alphabet soup agencies out of D.C. now that they've been told by SCOTUS, hey, by the way, Congress didn't explicitly give you the authority to do those things. And quite frankly, even if they did, we're not sure that they had the constitutional authority to do those things. So they should revert back to the states, and the state of Texas ought to say, not only heck yeah, but heck yeah twice, because we're going to do what we want to do to protect Texas and put Texas first. But we can't do that if we sit around mealy-mouthed, worried about what the Speaker of the House wants to do with vouchers or not. We can't do that while we've got a whole bunch of people that are running for office that refuse to say that I'm a Texan, I'm a third or fourth generation Texan, but I'm afraid to tell DC go pound sand, we're going to put Texas first. Now, it shouldn't seem to me that it's going to be that difficult to get some of our fellow Democrats out there, right? Those other fellows to say, well, yeah, we're maybe not exactly excited about some of this right-wing stuff you guys are doing, but we do respect Texas, and we do want to protect Texas, and we want to improve Texas. We maybe have a different idea how we can do that, but we really like the idea that we're going to produce our own power. We're going to be able to take care of our own people. And guess what? When you've got enough industry, and when you build things up, and you're producing things, and you're selling things, and you have a wicked smart economy here, you put people to work. People are taken care of. People naturally become a little more self-reliant. Oh, we can't have that. Well, yeah, progressives feel that way, but your average blue-collar Democrat, they're all in on that. They want jobs. Now, I watched that movie, Hillbilly Elegy. No matter what I think about J.D. Vance, that's a pretty compelling story. But one of the things I remember that was brought up is the whole idea of hope. Now, I've seen this time and time again. There are folks in East Texas that just lack hope. There are folks in South Dallas, and probably all of Houston for this point, that just lack hope. They see no way forward. They see no way to improve themselves. I don't know about you, but if we were to retool our agricultural economy to be pro-Texas, that would solve a lot of problems. If we would retool any number of sections of our economy, right, cattle, fish and wildlife, retool them to be pro-Texas. What do I mean by pro-Texas? Well, when you look at things and they're quote-unquote private property and they can be protected and they're going to have a value established to them, and you don't make it a giant pain in the butt in order to do them and do them with a profit, people will naturally do more of that. Now, I know how people feel about drugs, marijuana, and such. But I'm just going to guess that, hemp is a very usable, productive plant that would probably grow quite well in East Texas. And while I'm not excited about the fact that people are going to grow marijuana along with said hemp, I'm just guessing that there's a whole lot of products that could be made with hemp that would be superior than, cotton, polyester. I'm just saying. I don't understand why we're so afraid of doing these things. But if we were putting Texas first, if we were thinking about Texas and all the Texians here, perhaps we would rethink these things. You want to preserve and protect water. Well, the way you do that is to make sure you capture more of it. And you do it in a wise way. You don't put in little shallow lakes in East Texas when you can, fill up an existing lake further. Or you can take advantage of natural canyons. Yeah, okay, fine. You're going to lose some decorative stuff, and some little salamander might be, endangered. But you don't flood out thousands of acres of farmland so you can get 1.5 inches of water over them for 6 months out of the year. And yes, I'm exaggerating, and on purpose. When you put Texas first, that means you put the people of Texas first as well. That means you're concerned about the outcome and what's best for the people that inhabit Texas. And I'm talking about the people that have been here for 6 months, 6 years, 60 years, 6 generations. Maybe not the people that have been here 6 minutes, but you understand where I'm going with this. You have to build something that is here to last. You have to think beyond your own generation. That's been a fair criticism of capitalists. They're only concerned about the next quarter. They're only concerned about their next bonus. But what if we had leaders in Texas that actually thought about putting Texas first? And when they talked about putting Texas first, they had a plan on how to implement it. And there was a multi-generational plan, but also a multi-personnel plan. I'm the governor now, but I'm not going to be the governor in 8 years because I'm going to serve my 2 terms and go into retirement. And this guy here, he's going to be following me, and he's going to follow through on this plan. Or better yet, we're going to do such a good job with the plan, and we're going to finish it ahead of schedule. My part of the plan is going to be done. He's going to step up and do the next best thing. Or, hey, she's the director of agriculture or whatever, and she's working on this. Hey, guess what? You know that high-speed train nonsense that we've been talking about for decades and how it really won't work? But guess what? We could put in a high-speed cargo train that goes from one part of Texas to the other. Oh, I don't know, maybe the coast to West Texas, just hypothetically speaking. And we will pay a fee to every chunk of land we cross rather than buying it. Consider it like a lease. And when we do that, we're going to be able to do it with minimal stops, and we're going to move cargo efficiently. Because other than running it down an existing river, train transport is the most cost-effective way to move things. Then followed by semi-trucks. Now, we already have lots of roads, and we already have this in place. And that's true. But your truck drivers can only drive for so long. The trucks can only put on so many miles. Perhaps if we were to have a Texas first thought process here, we wouldn't punish people who found a way to work around those things. We wouldn't make it, quote, so safe that we can't ever have any risk. Now, look, I'm not encouraging anybody to be foolish or do something stupid, but when we let trucks cross the border from Mexico that aren't even inspected before they're let in, I'm far less concerned about people crossing Texas from Texas already. I'm just going to say it. And maybe, just maybe, if we can get our people, we Texians, to think beyond the next 6 months, beyond the next day. If we build it up to there's an interest in doing that, we can get to that point that we can make Texas truly independent in thought, in culture, and de facto. Now, for those of you that have been following along for a while, you know that for me personally, I believe de facto independence is far better than de jure independence because we get the best of both worlds. With de jure as being the trump card, right? Yeah, we're going to do what we want to do, DC, and we'll stay part of your union so long as it works for us. But the moment it doesn't, we're all set. We can do our own thing, and we'll see sayonara, baby. I mean, conceptually, the union was supposed to be a mutually beneficial environment. But does anybody really think that there's any mutual benefit left? Do we really get a net positive from being a part of the union any longer? I mean, I know we can see our massive debt that is growing by the moment. I know we can see all of our commitments to all these overseas provinces that we have bases that we really have no business being there. I know we can see where we're manipulating and abusing other countries worldwide. I know where I can see our corrupt culture being pressed upon others. So at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself, how can you oppose the concept of Texas first? How can you not be interested in it? How can you not at least be slightly enamored with the idea that we might be independent or be able to think for ourselves once again? You know, I talked about the first half of this episode just about things that I was going to guess are coming up next couple of days, next couple of weeks, next couple of months, maybe even the next couple of years. But I got to tell you, first and foremost, we got to have our vote. We got to be able to put our mark down and see where are we at. Is there a future for an independent-minded Texas? Notice I didn't say independent Texas, but an independent-minded Texas. Because you have to take one step after the other. I mean, we could barely get our elected officials that have R's after their name to sign on to the concept of putting Texas first. In that culture, in that existence, I don't see where we can go from here to full Texas independence without making a few stops along the way. So, yes, maybe we get a strong plurality or, God forbid, a majority of elected government officials at the state level that have signed on to Texas first. And then from there, perhaps we get that vote in the Republican Party primary where we get a majority. Or maybe it's slim, but maybe it's 60% or 65% that are like, yeah, we should be looking into this whole idea of an independent Texas. Maybe we should reassert our sovereignty. At that point, then we got to look at how do we start implementing these things. Hey, if you don't know anything about that, go read the book Tex It by Daniel Miller, or go check out tnm.me. Daniel Miller's done a lot of the grunt work on this. He's already sorted out a lot of the stuff and how it needs to happen in a legal process way. But those are things we could be looking at. And those same elected officials that claim they're Texas first, now we could start holding their feet to the fire. What are you going to do about this? How are you going to fix this? Because we only have a limited amount of time in order to get these things done. How are we going to do it? I mean, we have a couple of nice natural ports in the state of Texas. I want to know why we don't have shipbuilders there. I don't know why we don't have a much bigger fleet of fishing trawlers. I don't know. Why don't we do these things? Is it just that there's no interest, or that we've made it too difficult? Good questions, I think. But if we put a Texas first policy in place, why not incentivize people to go do these things? Now, look, I don't want to deplete the entirety of the Gulf of Mexico oil or shellfish or fish, but we should be finding a way to do these things and do them well. We don't need permission from anybody to do that. We need to do it. We need to do it well. We need to find a way forward. We need to figure out a way to put Texas first. And we can't do any of those things until those same said elected officials are willing to take a step forward and say, yes, we should be putting Texas first and our people first, because at heart, we're all Texians here. We all want what's best for Texas. And at some point after that, we then start pushing back and say, yeah, that's fine, D.C., but we're not going to do that. No, that's fine, D.C., you stay out. No, that's fine, D.C., but you don't have that authority here. Whether it's with a county level sheriff or a state department that just says, no, we're not going to do that anymore. But none of that's going to happen if we can't even get a basic majority of our elected officials, most of whom have R's after their names, to sign on to a pledge as simple as putting the desires and needs of the people of Texas first. And at some way down that path, maybe years from now, we get cultural independence. We get a mantra of putting Texas first in everybody's lips. And we have de facto independence. And we can stand up boldly to the bully on the Potomac and say, keep it up. Keep it up. Because we'll throw your butt out and lock the door behind you. And with that, this has been According to Callus. I thank you for giving me your time. I appreciate it. Again, do me a solid. Like, share, subscribe. Do what you can. Further, give some love over to those folks over at Texian Pride. I'll have another one of their ads at the end of this episode here. If you love Texas, you ought to be checking out Texian Pride. And with that, this has been According to Callus, and I will see you on the other side.
TexianPride.com is the destination for Texans who want to show off their love for Texas. We don't settle for mediocre. Our shirts are made from 100% high-quality athletic cotton. They're cool, comfortable, and designed to fit and flatter any body type. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Visit TexianPride.com for your next stylish Texas tee.